Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're going to be talking about Michigan's running back room. We're going to discuss both Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, as well as giving them stat predictions and potentially awards that they could win, as well as deciding if they are the best duo in the country, and discussing who will be running back 3. Let's go ahead and get it started off with Blake Corum, the starter. Blake the Great. Positives, he's an elite football player. He does well on gap or zone runs. He might be the best running back in college football. He's very elusive and has outstanding agility. Is probably his best trait from a scouting perspective is his agility. He can run through arm tackles despite being 5'8" and like 200 pounds. He can run through arm tackles. He's very slippery, very hard to bring down. I believe last year he had the single highest graded season by a running back in the history of Pro Football Focus. I think if he was healthy, he would have won the Heisman. Running away, I think he probably would have had at least one of those big, long runs that Donovan Edwards had for a touchdown, and potentially more. There was that one play on the opening drive that everybody knows about where if Blake Corum was in the game, probably would have scored a touchdown. As far as the negatives, he is a little bit small, doesn't really have home run speed, and has gotten injured each of the past 2 years, as well as he's not a factor in the passing game. Now, none of these are really negatives. They're more nitpick critiques. I do think the home run speed is what is likely going to prevent him from getting drafted on day 2 of the NFL draft. He's probably a day 3 guy, even though I think he's going to be really good in the NFL, but he's probably a mid to low 4.5 speed guy, and when you're 5'8" and probably aren't going to be able to be a bell cow running back at the next level, the lack of the speed is really going to knock him down some draft boards. Now, the height is not as much of a concern as weight usually is, and Blake Corum actually has a lot of good weight on him, so that's not all that much of a concern, but the frame potentially could be. As far as what I mean by frame, that is a very in-depth topic that perhaps I will cover one day, but I also don't really think that's all that much of a concern with Blake Corum, but sort of the minor injuries that he's had. Well, he did tear a muscle in his knee this past year. That's not really a minor injury, but when you're talking about from an NFL scouting perspective, the real things that are going to hurt him is going to be the lack of home run speed and the fact that he's not a factor in the pass game at all. That doesn't mean that I don't think he could be a factor in the pass game. In fact, I think he could be really good in the pass game, but he's just not utilized like that in Michigan's offense. And getting into that, this is the stat predictions that I'm going to be predicting for Blake Corum this year. I'm predicting 1,100 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, 100 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. These are somewhat pedestrian numbers for a running back of his caliber, but I just don't think Michigan is going to run the ball as much this upcoming year as they did last year. I mean, last year they almost doubled the amount of run plays that they had compared to pass plays. They think they ran 63 or 64% of the time. This year, I think it's probably going to be like 55% of the time. So he's just not going to have as many touches because of that, but also because I think it's really going to be more of a true 50-50 split between him and Donovan Edwards this year as well. I think Donovan Edwards proved when Blake Corum went down that he is one of the 10 best running backs in all of college football and deserves that sort of status as a co-starter, quote unquote. As far as the awards for him, they're all on the table except for Heisman in my opinion. Now, if Donovan Edwards were to get hurt and Blake Corum all of a sudden has to get 25, 30 touches a game, then the Heisman comes back onto the table. But I'm not going to predict that to happen because I don't like predicting injuries to happen. Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, Doak Walker, First Team All-American, First Team All-Big Ten, that's all on the table. In fact, First Team All-Big Ten is fairly likely, even though the running backs in the Big Ten are just absolutely stacked. He has a very good chance to get all of those things. Just in general, everything is on the table for Blake Corum. The other starter, Donovan Edwards. Positives, he can really do it all. He's got home run speed, he's got power to break arm tackles, he's an elite receiving back, and he might be the best running back in the country. I said a lot of those same things about Blake Corum, including the part about him maybe being the best running back in the country. And because of that, I do believe Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum are the best running back duo in the country. If I had to pick what number 2 was going to be, I would probably say Penn State. And then number 3, I would probably say Ohio State. And then the Big Ten also has another top 10 running back in the country in Braylon Allen at Wisconsin. His freshman year, he was really more of an athlete than anything as far as Donovan Edwards goes. And this past year, he really showed that the vision improved, that he was a better route runner, and that he was just physically more ready for the game at this level. As far as the negatives go, you're really just nitpicking at this point. There isn't a whole lot. The injuries, again, he broke his hand this last year. He's not that elusive as far as in terms of make you miss. He's much more straight line. His agility is not nearly as good as Blake Corum or some of the other running backs, even in conference. Last thing, this is more of something that is going to be more of a scouting critique for him. This past year, he did kind of seem like potentially the sort of player who's going to be the jack of all trades, master of none, meaning that he'll be good at everything, but not really elite at anything. Now, that being said, I think he will dispel pretty much all of these rumors except for the elusiveness this upcoming year. I think he could potentially be the number 1 running back off the board in the NFL draft. I think at the NFL level, he has perennial Pro Bowl, All-Pro type of potential. He is a better running back prospect than Blake Corum, even though Blake Corum probably right now is a better running back. As far as what I think he's going to do this year, again, if Blake Corum gets hurt, these numbers are obviously going to rise, in my opinion. But I do believe he is going to get a more even split of the touches and carries in the run game this year. Because of that, I've got him getting 1,000 yards as well as 7 rushing touchdowns, most of which are going to be him breaking big plays from 20, 30 yards out or longer. I don't really think he's going to be the goal line back. I think Blake Corum will likely fill that role as he did last year. Receiving, I do think he's going to be very good. 450 yards I'm predicting there, and an additional 4 receiving touchdown. As far as the awards, pretty much exactly the same as Blake Corum. The Doak Walker Award, the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, First Team All-American, First Team All-Big Ten. All of those are on the table for him, and potentially even more. He could be a first-round draft pick legitimately. I do think he will get drafted before Blake Corum in the 2024 draft if he decides to come out. Now, I don't think he's going to come back. He's probably going to declare for 2024, in my opinion. But I also didn't think Blake Corum was going to come back either. So I could be completely wrong. But I really like Donovan Edwards as both a running back and a player for the University of Michigan, as well as from a scouting perspective. Probably right now my running back 2, just because Rocket Sanders has a little bit better production than him. But if we really get down into the nitty-gritty of it, we get the testing numbers. Donovan Edwards could very easily end up running back 1 in this next class. So who's going to be RB3 in terms of probably between 5 and 10 touches a game, because Corum and Edwards are going to be the guys that are going to get probably 90% of the carries, assuming they both remain healthy the whole year. So who's going to be that third guy, who's going to step up and be the change of pace guy if one of the other 2 have to miss a game or something like that? I think these are the 3 most likely options on the board right here. I do real quickly want to mention Cole Kabinda, the running back, a true freshman, who I believe people would be talking about a lot more if he had been healthy and played in the spring game. I did have the opportunity to watch Cole Kabinda live. He played football at Dexter High School, and I live right near there, so I did have the opportunity to see him live, and that boy is fast as fuck. So he is somebody who potentially year 1 you could see on special teams a whole lot, but I think it's more likely that he's redshirted. Same thing with Benjamin Hall. But these are the 3 that I think have the opportunity to legitimately become running back 3 by the end of the season. The first one we're going to talk about is Khalil Mullings. You looked at him play last year and you're like, what in the hell is he in the running back 3 conversation at all? Now, running back 3, if Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards do not get hurt, is almost certainly going to be Khalil Mullings in terms of who's going to get the most snaps, because he's probably going to come in on short yardage situations and like true, we're on the 1 yard line situations, because that was his role when Blake Corum went down last year, and this year he'll probably be way better at it. So I think he's probably the most likely outcome to actually be, in terms of practice, running back 3, because he has a defined role that he's going to be able to do, and he's had a whole ass offseason to prepare for that role, as opposed to like 3 weeks. So now, if Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards were to go down with a semi-serious injury, I think CJ Stokes would likely be the guy. I do like CJ Stokes a lot. I think he's going to be a good running back. I don't think he's going to be anywhere as good as Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards, but I think he's going to be a quality running back for the Michigan Wolverines. We got to be patient with running backs. Now, I think some people tend to forget that Donovan Edwards wasn't really all that good as a freshman. He had that one big game against Maryland, but that was really all that he did. And Blake Corum wasn't very good in his freshman year either. So we need to pump the brakes on the CJ Stokes hate a little bit. Like, yes, he missed some potentially big plays. Vision is the one thing that running backs are going to get better at from freshman to sophomore year. Like, you can almost universally guarantee that they're going to be able to see the field better. I think CJ Stokes has the potential to be a high-quality running back in the Big Ten, and probably, likely, the RB3 who could step up and be RB2 if they really needed him to. The last one that I'm going to talk about is Benjamin Hall. Benjamin Hall looks like a really, really good athlete who's got some serious power and breaking tackle possession while also having a good amount of juice. He is someone who appears to have been remarkably under-recruited, and Mike Hart has been finding these guys left and right as far as these running backs go. It would not surprise me if, just based off of potential, he was somebody who got a lot of the garbage time carries this year. So statistically speaking, he might end up being the running back with the third most carries, the third most yards. And potentially, it's not off the table for him to just beat out CJ Stokes and be RB3. That's not out of the question either. In which case, CJ Stokes likely transfers at the end of this year. But I like Benjamin Hall a lot. Every now and then, you just see a player and you're like, oh, that guy's a dude. And I got that feeling with Ben Hall in the... Actually, I don't know if I should call him Ben Hall or not. I don't know if he prefers Ben or Benjamin. But I guess I'll go back and forth in this video, and if I ever find out, I'll apologize. But it would not surprise me if he just flat out became RB3 this year. Especially CJ Stokes doesn't improve like I think it's likely he's going to improve. So those are the 3 running backs that I think are going to contend for the RB3 spot, and they all have probably different ways of getting to that. And with all that being said, that is all that I have for you today. Up next, we're going to be doing the positional breakdowns part 3, wide receivers. And I am very much looking forward to that one. So if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Go ahead and leave a comment if you disagreed with me at any point during this video. But let's keep it civil. After all, what do I know? I'm just some asshole. And I'll see you next time.